The first thing to return wasn't a thought, it was a flavor, a flat metallic sting, as if my tongue had pressed itself to a coin that had been sleeping in permafrost. Cold followed, not the theatrical shiver of air conditioning, but a deep cellular chill, the kind your marrow remembers. My eyelids were glued shut. I pried them open, grain by grain, until the world detonated into a white that felt personal. A woman's face swam out of the glare, haloed by a panel light that made her look sanctified by an electrician. Sharp features, dark hair levered back into a knot so functional it could have been a tool. Her composure was precise, measured. Her eyes held the stillness of a professional at the edge of exhaustion. "Mr. Ford," she said softly, as if loudness could chip me. "Damon, can you hear me?" I tried to answer and only managed a sandpaper whisper. I was cradled in a shallow basin slick with cooling gel. Hair-fine leads unzipped themselves from my temples and forearms, retracting into polished housings with the etiquette of expensive machinery. A corporate job, premium tier. Whatever I'd paid, I'd gotten a concierge package. "Don't speak yet," she murmured, glancing at a transparent slate that hovered beside her, numbers cascading in organized panic. "Your name is Damon Ford. You were placed in cryopreservation in the year 2024? She hesitated. A tremor flashed through her hand. Small, but the kind you don't get rid of with coffee. "Today is May 4th, 2222. The number didn't thud. It diluted. 198 years of capital, goodwill, and leverage softened by time until it ran through cupped hands. Contacts, gone. Structures, dissolved. Accounts, read as anecdotes in history feeds. The arithmetic of absence wrote itself across my face. She read it and mistook it for shock. "I'm Dr. Rachel Linwood," she continued, "Chief Biologist, Sanctuary 1. You're safe." A thin smile, rehearsed for anxious patients and skeptical boards. "You're home." Home is a word people use to sell you something you didn't ask for. The pod tilted, gel sluiced away. A blanket that had never known a laundromat, only a sterilizer, landed across my chest. My throat declared itself a desert. Someone, something, anticipated that too. Humidified air kissed my lips, medicine microfiltered and vaguely citrus, a kindness engineered at scale. "Water," I rasped. A straw touched my mouth. Whatever passed for water here tasted like nothing at all, an absence so pure it felt expensive. The first swallow scalded. The second came with a breath that didn't hurt. "Cryogradation is minimal," she said to the slate, more than to me. "Motor response with unexpected bands. Cognition." She looked back down into me, and for a moment the script dropped. What looked out of her was unvarnished, need, braided with hope, sparking on fear. "Cognition intact," she finished, but that wasn't for a record, that was for her. She talked while machines fussed with me. The words came in the cadence of a briefing. The world I'd bought into fell apart slowly. Combustion in slow motion. Conflicts that never ended. Climate that stopped making bargains. Pathogens that learned. By the time the graphs stopped arguing, the air itself was a contract written in poison. Surface populations adapted or died. The ones who burrowed into sealed habitats named themselves pure. They called the survivors on the surface modified, which is the sort of label you choose when you're writing your own brochure. "Sanctuary 1 is self-sustaining," Rachel said. "Closed-loop water, closed-loop atmosphere, agriculture by hydroponic arrays. We've maintained viability through 8 generations." And now? My voice sounded younger than I remembered, as if the cryo had sanded age from the tone. 37 forever, the only benefits package I'd ever wanted that might actually pay out. She exhaled, a quiet collapse barely visible in the muscles around her eyes. Now, the gene pool is shallow. We're seeing progressive failures, what we call genomic collapse syndrome. Repair mechanisms degrading, error rates rising. We're losing ground. I watched the cracks opening in her composure and filed them. Asset, high value. Constraint, fatigue, hidden variable, fear. We needed a reset, she said. A clean template from before the fall. We searched for decades. Then we found you. She let that idea sit, warm between us. It didn't yet wear the name, but the pitch was already on its feet. You're telling me I'm a museum piece, I said. I'm telling you, your genome may be the key. The slate pulsed a soft blue at her shoulder. The light made her look briefly younger. We call it the Salvation Project. With your blueprint, we can repair our line. Perhaps one day reverse the surface mutations. There it was, the banner unfurled. I didn't bother to ask who wrote it. People don't invent words like salvation without a committee. Well, doctor, I said, and found the smile I used for closings. It sounds like we have a lot of work to do. They gave me 7 days to relearn being alive. 7 days of paste that claimed nutrition and tasted like a white room. 7 days of physical assessments with technicians who spoke to me like a fragile shipment. Rachel arrived each cycle with information packaged the only way information travels across centuries, in charts that don't pretend to have feelings. She fed me 200 years like a quarterly report. Regions rising, regions redlined, decade on decade yield of failure. She built me a history of the collapse and, politely, a context in which she and her people had always been right. I let her do it. A good con never fights the mark's need to help. My quarters were immaculate in the way of expensive prisons. The air had been recycled so many times it had lost its biography. The silence was absolute, a product engineered and delivered. From the bed I could see the door with its discreet seam and the ceiling's soft wash of light that pretended to be daylight without any of daylight's accidents. The first time I stood by myself, my knees negotiated terms. The second time, they signed. The few others I saw moved with frictionless intent, eyes forward, faces set into that neutrality institutions teach. It didn't feel like a city. It felt like a server farm that had taught itself to walk. I counted cameras the way I counted exits in restaurants when my name still meant something topside. The image of takeover bloomed in my mind without permission. It was an old reflex, and reflexes don't care about calendars. On day 3, Rachel arrived with a procession of micro needles and a bedside whiteboard I suspected she never actually needed. On day 5, she stopped asking whether I remembered my name before she started the briefing. On day 6, I asked if the paste came in any flavor other than defeat. She made a sound that wasn't laughter and promised I could chew real food soon if my numbers didn't betray her. On day 7, I woke without the panicked moment of not knowing where I was. That's how domestication measures progress. On the 8th day, she came without any props. No tray, no cart, no ceremonial devices. "You're acclimating well," she said, reading readings I couldn't see. "Minimal cryogradation. It's time you saw what we're fighting for and what we're fighting against." She walked. I followed. The corridors felt neither built nor carved. They looked extruded, as if the metal had been persuaded to flow and then scolded into shape. Sound died politely on the walls. We passed labs behind armored glass where white-coated ghosts tended orchards of light, the hydroponics that fed the sealed. We passed residential modules with unit numbers where names would have lived in any world that remembered them. Efficiency, I said, because silence invites commentary. She didn't answer, and I didn't need her to. Efficiency is what you stitch into a system when redundancy has become a luxury. At the end of a corridor, a door the size of a vault splayed open in segments. We stepped into a room that didn't want to be noticed until you looked up. The wall opposite the entrance wasn't a wall. It was a single sheet of polycrystal that looked onto my old address. The surface. The sky had the color of a healing bruise. Light made it through in a smear. The skeletons of towers jutted like ribs. A highway cut across the middle distance, lanes grayed into anonymity, arcs leading nowhere. The kind of view that would have sold for 7 figures when our great-grandparents still believed in square footage. It's beautiful, I said, because irony is a currency, and I was still rich. The toxicity isn't just atmospheric, Rachel said, as if I hadn't spoken. Quietly, so the glass wouldn't think we were trying to provoke it. It's saturated through soil and water, stable in ways we don't like. Movement snagged the eye. A dozen figures, thin, quick, in clothes you'd call makeshift if you'd never actually had to make anything. They moved over the rubble with a grace I recognized from geometry. They didn't shout or signal, but they turned together the way flocks do, the way schools of fish flick a single thought between them and call it the current. The modified, she said. The word hung between us as both diagnosis and indictment. What found me then wasn't sound. It began in the soles of my shoes, a pressure that belonged in earthquakes, not in bones. It climbed, ankles, knees, hips, spine, and set up residence behind my eyes. The metallic taste from waking returned sharp and wrong. A headache unfolded like a flower from hell, petal by mechanical petal, precise as a metronome. The world shifted an inch left and then snapped back. What is that? It came out tighter than I wanted. Rachel watched me watching the world. Clinical curiosity softened into something that wanted to be sympathy and couldn't afford it. The surface tribes call it the bone song. We log it as anomalous low-frequency resonance, infrasound. They use it to coordinate. Some of us down here are sensitive to it. A pause. It may correlate with unmodified neural architecture. She framed it like an honor, an award for purity. But the resonance wasn't a handshake. It was a trespass. It pressed through skin and into place. A presence that treated my body like an instrument it now owned. You can label that communication if you need a gentle bedtime story. Your nervous system knows better. The ache sharpened, the hum thickened. Outside, the flock moved as one along the tumbled spine of a collapsed exchange. They didn't look up. Why would they? The sky was a ceiling they couldn't see through and had been told not to try. I put a hand against the glass to steady a world that refused to stay still. You don't feel it? I asked. Rachel shook her head. I measure it, she said, which is a different verb and a different faith. It doesn't reach me the way it reaches you. The thought uncorked itself without my help. A channel humming with a language I could not learn because the gate was built from a thing I didn't have. Fear arrived, not the melodramatic fear of dying, but the professional fear of becoming irrelevant. I had built a life on knowing the rule book and spotting the misprint no one else saw. Out there, something had written an addendum, and no one had sent me the memo. "We study it," Rachel said into my silence. "We model, we test. There are patterns. The amplitude rises before tribal migrations. It dips in—" She stopped herself and tucked the rest back into the tidy file where she kept facts until she could spend them on me for maximum return. "We'll brief you when you're stable." "I'm stable," I said, and tasted the lie instantly. The hum in my bones had opinions about my stability. She didn't argue. That was a different kind of power. "We'll take you back now." The walk to my quarters felt longer than the walk out. The hum tapered as the room receded. The taste in my mouth thinned to background metal. The door sealed behind us with a hush that had cost money to perfect. Machines considered me and found me acceptable. Rachel handed me a pouch of something thicker than water and pretended it was food. "Tomorrow," she said, "we begin mapping. We'll translate your genome into a language our systems can synthesize against. There will be scans. It won't be pleasant. In my experience," I said, "the things that work rarely are." She studied me then in a way that wasn't medical. "You're adapting quickly." "I had a head start," I said. "The century taught me practice." I set the pouch down and met her eyes. "You'll have what you need, Doctor." A breath. Gratitude threatened her composure, and discipline didn't break it. "Rest," she said. "I need you clear." When the door closed, silence returned like a tax. I lay back and watched the ceiling pretend to be a sky. The week unrolled in my head, threaded with her voice. Sanctuary, pure, modified, collapse, salvation. The words arranged themselves into a familiar structure, a pitch deck to raise capital when the market's tired of your story. She'd spent years polishing it. She'd found me and given it a protagonist. The hum reached for me through memory and found purchase. For a moment, my jaw tightened, and the world went off by a half-degree before snapping straight. I breathed through it and made a note, not on paper or slate, not in any place someone could subpoena, but in that quiet ledger I've always kept. Every system has a user interface. Every pitch has its missing slide. If the next chapter of my existence was going to be written by other hands, I wanted a pen. I closed my eyes. The ceiling failed to become a sky. The silence stayed engineered. The aftertaste wouldn't leave. "Home," I said to the empty room, and watched the word evaporate before it hit the floor. The room they built to read me pretended to be kind. Light fell in honeycombs across my body, a lattice of projection mapping that made geometry out of skin. The basin was colder than revival, conductive gel sluicing heat out of marrow until I could feel my blood forget it was blood. Overhead, a halo of emitters sang in frequencies that didn't require consent. Rachel stood within arm's reach, the high priestess of a polite machine, eyes flicking through the cascade on her slate as if she were translating scripture in real time. For 20 minutes, the data fell with the clean tick of a metronome. You don't have to know a language to hear its grammar. You just have to listen long enough for the cadence. Then the cadence slipped, not a stumble, a precision cut. For less than a blink, the waterfall froze, and a paper-thin sheet of code peeled sideways, neural chemistry tagged, shunted into a sub-protocol that didn't publicly exist. before the stream resealed itself as if the world had always flowed that way. "What was that?" I asked, casual. The kind of tone you use for an intern who's just told you something is probably fine. Rachel didn't look up. She rewound the last 10 seconds, froze the anomaly on the frame I'd seen. She had the answer chambered. "Legacy handshake protocol," she said, voice sanded smooth. "Your genome is encrypted with 20th century markers. We build a custom key on the fly, query a secondary library for syntax. Occasionally, there's a fractional delay while we normalize the archaic, forgive me, original code. Polite, technical, flawless. A fresh lie is clumsy. This one had been rehearsed against a mirror. The halo went on reading me. I let it. I made the appropriate noises and asked the appropriate questions until the session signed its own paperwork and released me. Back in my immaculate cell, I took the access Rachel had given me to make me feel essential and treated it like a crowbar. That night, under the fiction of studying pre-collapse atmospheric models, I crawled the network like a patient parasite. I wasn't looking for science. I was looking for grit. Security logs have a smell when they've been over-tidied. I found the ghost in the margins of their polished failure, minor anomalies that led nowhere. A case of synthetic opiates evaporating from a locked dispensary. A private counsel exchange read by eyes it wasn't meant to feed. A door that never admitted a badge but opened anyway. Investigations authenticated their own impotence. One frustrated executive had scribbled a name where names don't belong. Jack, broker, smuggler, interstitial man. The kind of third party every closed system breeds if it wants to keep lying to itself about being closed. I found the dustiest corner of the net, an ancient archive that held geological surveys no one had cared about for 8 generations. I wrote a survey that measured nothing at all and buried a message in its metadata where only someone scanning for contraband would look. Asset requires external consultant, valuable consideration, prove access. I flushed the terminal's cache and waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, the bone hum threaded into every task until it felt like my skull had grown a motor. Day 3, Rachel's voice braided around charts I didn't need and told me the sanctuary's history again, this time with a handful of adjectives to see if I reacted. I smiled in the right places. Night of the 3rd day, halfway to sleep, I knew without knowing. The terminal woke to a dietary manifest I hadn't opened. Between paste percentages and micronutrients, a new line in unadorned font, access proven, channel 17, midday, one-time use. The channel was a black screen with a single blinking cursor. No handshake, no greeting, no chaff. I typed like we were already mid-negotiation. I require raw atmospheric and seismic data from 3 surface locations. Quadrants specified in attachment. Source must be independent. No sanctuary hardware, no sanctuary software. The reply did not waste a single pixel. Difficult, high risk, expensive. Payment is not an issue. The cursor paused, the way a person tilts their head when they can smell the rate you'll tolerate. Consideration: 6 vials. O, synthetic hemoglobin, 100-gram weapons-grade plastics, 12 ABA-7 microbatteries, fully charged. He'd priced me correctly. I had clearance to requisition all 3 under the soft glare of experimental protocols. He knew my shopping list better than my custodians did. Agreed. Provide delivery protocol. Negative. I choose location. You leave the package. If trap, I am gone. If not, you get data. The broker dictates the terms. It's how you know he is who he says he is. Acceptable. Transaction pending. The channel erased itself like a good thief. Waiting is cheap until it isn't. The hum climbed ladders in my bones and built scaffolds behind my eyes. The medicals offered analgesics that turned my thoughts to soft fruit and neural dampeners that made my body feel rented. Useless. I broke etiquette and reopened the one timeline that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. My previous request is on hold. New contract. Priority immediate. The broker sets terms. The headache from the surface. Hum compromises my ability to procure your payment. Solve it. A weakness is leverage if you put a price on it. The cursor blinked. I could feel him recalibrating my worth. This is transaction of flesh. Higher risk. New price. Name it. To be determined by solution. Meeting. 3 days. Rusk Cathedral, Sector Gamma 7. Come alone. Wait for the bruise to thin. The bruise was the sky. He spoke fluent surface. I left through a filtration alcove that smelled of ozone and recycled rain. The poncho they gave me was gray in the way of things designed by committees. The rebreather made every inhale a contract clause. Outside, the world was cathedral architecture rotted by time. 4 cooling towers clawing an injured sky, streaked in iron tears. Light filtered through filth and made a kind of stained glass on dust. He didn't show. An old man did, bent like a question mark carved out of sinew. Layers of stitched hides, a staff of pale knotted wood, eyes like well water, clear, cold, and deeper than you want to admit. "You are the untuned man," he said, voice like stone against stone. "I was told you could help with a physical ailment," I said, keeping my posture neutral and my contempt banked. Jack had appended a word to his coordinates, menor, healer, which could just as easily mean charlatan, depending on whose dictionary you use. He didn't bother with my words. He stepped in close and laid 2 fingers against the hinge of my jaw, right over the joint where the hum had set up shop. "Your song is loud," he murmured to his own diagnosis. "Not a sickness, an imbalance. The world sings, and your bones try to answer, but you do not know the words." He made a small ritual of a leather pouch. When he spilled it, I smelled damp earth and the first bite of lightning. "Ash and moss," he said, not looking up, "grows where the sky metal bleeds into the earth, and clay from the silent riverbeds." He wet it with water he carried like it mattered and worked it into a paste. "Behind the ears," he said, "where the skull listens." I'm a rationalist, shaped by profit and the kind of school that never writes its name on buildings. I felt ridiculous smearing ruin on my head in a rust cathedral. I did it anyway. Silence fell like a trapdoor. Not a fade, not a mercy. An instantaneous subtraction. Pressure behind my eyes. Gone. Metallic aftertaste. Gone. The motor threaded through my bones, killed. The industrial ache I'd accepted as the weather of this era, absent. The world didn't become quiet. It became honest. Wind moved through the ribs of dead towers with a low voice. Grit made a dry sound under my boots. For 74 minutes, the silence held. I timed it. When it ended, it didn't leak back. It snapped on. The switch reasserted itself and brought with it something I hadn't recognized before the quiet taught me how to listen. Intention. The hum wasn't ambient. It was aimed. A presence, indifferent and precise, slid its hand into my biology like a glove. I came home as if I were sneaking into my own house. The walls exhaled filtered air at me. Rachel handed me a new briefing with a face that wanted me to believe she slept. While she spoke, I opened the channel the broker would pretend didn't exist until he needed it. Priority 1. New contract. Previous transaction. Void. Find the point of origin for the anomalous low-frequency resonance. The bone song. Find the broadcaster. This time, the cursor made a performance of its blinking. This is not data retrieval. This is an intelligence operation against an unknown, possibly non-human actor. Risk incalculable. Price will reflect. He wanted blood. I offered a vein. Complete source code and hardware. Schematics for sanctuary. 1 water reclamation and atmospheric filtration. Primary algorithms in 24 hours. Balance on delivery. Pause. Predators know when someone throws their own throat on the table. I could feel his acceptance like temperature. Consideration accepted. Project codename Rosetta. Communication when I have something to sell. He cut the line. I sat under the engineered silence and listened to the louder one the world spoke into my bones. Waiting is different when you understand the thing you're waiting on can see you. The hum found new edges to bite. I delivered the advance. Code dense enough to choke a lesser man. Rachel signed my clearances without looking up from her slate, which is a particular kind of trust that isn't trust at all. It's exhaustion with lipstick. Mid-cycle, when the sanctuary made less noise than usual, my terminal woke itself. No preface, no coyness, just an encrypted packet named Rosetta nested in a sandbox I spun up for it. Not a report. A triptych of truths. Panel 1. 2 curves overlaid. The bone song's amplitude and frequency rendered across days. The density of atmospheric toxins across the same window. They matched like mirror and object. Where the song brightened, the bruise darkened. Where the song dimmed, the sky thinned. Natural systems rhyme. Engineered systems rhyme perfectly. Panel 2. Telemetry ghosts, scraped from a pre-collapse listening post hardwired to a dead constellation. The sky above us cataloged like a memory palace. Most entries, wreckage. But 3 weren't wreckage. 3 were flagged as non-terrestrial. Masked signatures bleeding only a thin thread of resonance through their camouflage, hiding in plain orbit. Panel 3, spectral analysis of one of those threads laid over a recording of the bone song I'd made without admitting it to myself. The match was perfect down to the petty decimals. The signal reigned. It didn't rise, it was sung at us. I leaned back and let the new map settle into the old one, and all the accidents of the world arranged themselves into product design. Toxic air wasn't an afterlife of disaster, it was a fence. The hum wasn't culture, it was control. The war between pure and modified wasn't tragedy, it was feature. Before I could write a price, the channel painted the next line across my screen. Project Rosetta, complete. The data speaks for itself. The consideration is yours. Send protocol. The cursor took its time. Then, law. The transaction is void. The value of the discovered asset far exceeds stipulated payment. Contract entered into under false pretenses, namely scale, is invalid. This information is no longer a deliverable. It is now an independent asset. I am its sole proprietor. It is for sale. He'd moved the goalposts because he'd lifted the stadium. Somewhere in the sanctuary, a younger me would have admired the audacity. Here, I watched the line burn. The auction is now open. The hum in my bones found a new pitch. Rage is acid. I let it chew through me. Panic is noise. I let it spend itself against the walls. I gave myself 2 days of those luxuries and then borrowed from the part of me that still understood triage. I went to Rachel's lab. She stood before a bioprinter that wove tissue the way a loom sings cloth. The machine's arms performed precise liturgy under her hand. She didn't hear me approach. "The lie must be exhausting," I said. It was almost kind. "The legacy handshake protocol, the sub-protocol you're running in parallel. Where are you hiding my assets?" She turned with her authority face on. "Paranoia is a documented response to cryo-reanimation at your timescale," she said, like she was dictating to someone transcribing for a court. "You're under psychological stress." "Doctor," I said, "I was paranoid before you were born." The slate at her shoulder chirped and flashed a red icon. A crack opened in her mask. You could have slid a knife through. She stabbed the alert away and the crack didn't close. "What was that?" I asked. "Legacy protocol," she said again, but the word shook. "It's handled." "Whose system?" I stepped into her space and watched the kind of intelligence that can't find an exit look for one anyway. "You don't understand," she whispered. It wasn't defense, it was confession, warm in itself. "Then make me," I said. "My daughter?" she said to the machinery, as if it could absolve her. "Lily, 11. The name arrived like an object she'd tried to keep underwater for 7 years and couldn't. End-stage genomic collapse. Her DNA is dissolving. Weeks, maybe less. The architecture of the sanctuary's noble lie tilted all at once, revealing the private room hidden behind the lobby. "There is no reunification serum," she went on, the truth spilling without punctuation now. "Not for everyone, there never was. I found your pod 7 years ago. Your genome was—" She met my eyes. There was no apology in her. "A perfect one-to-one template for one damaged genome. A match. Hers." The Salvation Project was a marketing campaign to launder a theft into heroism. She had built a religion to save a single child. I had cast myself as God. She'd hired me as a tool. I didn't moralize. I pivoted. I left the lab, borrowed a rebreather and a poncho again, and went hunting the old river's bones. The city had a vein where water used to work. Now it was a bleached scar. I found Eva kneeling in the chalk, digging with fingers that had learned patient extraction before I was born. He didn't turn when I spoke. "Shepherd," I said, and the word felt like it had a burr under it. "The song is a lie." "The song does not need to be true to be beautiful," he said, using up as few words as possible. "Or to be useful." "You knew," I said. "It has been a long time since anything in this world was truly ours," he answered, and finally faced me. He looked small against the absence where a river should be. "You have seen the note behind the music. Good. Now you're listening." "The signal comes from the sky," I said. "The toxicity and the song, they're linked. It's a system, but why? Who sings? To what end?" "You are a man of sharp edges," he said, which is both compliment and diagnosis. "You see parts and call it the whole. You see a shepherd, a flock, and a song, and you think the song is for control. You are not wrong. You are not right." He lifted his staff toward the bruise of sky where the broadcasters hid in their patient ellipses. "You think the shepherd sings for love of his flock. That is a story for children." He held my gaze until the weight of what he was about to say bent my spine with his. "A farmer does not sing to his wheat. He sings to pass the time as he sharpens the scythe." The metaphor wasn't a metaphor. It was a schematic. I felt the old Damon Ford try to argue jurisdiction with a universe that had never heard of me. The hum tightened like a wire and then, curiously, lost its meaning. It didn't become soft. It became background. For 3 days I sat in my engineered silence and let insignificance do what it does when you stop wrestling it. Clarify. Rachel had shown me what a mother will spend. Jack had shown me what a broker will seize. Iva had shown me where the skull listens. The farmer had shown me the size of the ledger. I opened the terminal and refused the private network that had taught me its doors. I went down into the sanctuary's fossil record and found a global emergency frequency that had gone unused since people believed sirens could help. I wrote a sentence that was both white flag and poisoned gift, both leverage and liability. Then I stripped its encryption because some messages are most dangerous when everyone can read them. Project Rosetta, Damon Ford, proposes a merger. I sent it. For a breath, the room was only my pulse and the tiny countertone unit Jack hadn't built for me yet. Then a seam in the wall I had never noticed sighed open, revealing a dark cavity. A slate waited inside, unmarked. It woke to a set of coordinates and a time. Nothing else. I stood there with the farmer's song pressing lightly against my bones and the sanctuary's air whispering ethics in my ear. Then I began to pack. Jack's nest was 30 floors up in a tower the wind had been chewing for a century. I climbed emergency stairs until my legs wrote their complaint into the marrow, and then stepped into a room that had once sold views to men who believed in glass. The windows were teeth now, jagged gaps where the sky pushed its bruise inside. Wires crossed the floor like a nervous system stitched from scavenged organs. A semicircle of mismatched slates showed the city the way a carrion bird might. Thermal, spectral, seismic, each feed a different way of saying, "Keep me alive." Jack sat in a chair patched from 3 other chairs. He wore layers built for function, not narrative. The first impression he gave was subtraction. No wasted motion, no ornament, no generosity. The second impression was worse. His eyes didn't land on things. They measured them and put them on a shelf in a mind that never mislabeled. "A merger," he said, as if reading a weather report. "Bold for a man with no assets." "You're mistaken," I said, hands open, palms empty. "I have the only asset that matters. I'm the anomaly, the wild seed in a field that shouldn't have one, and you helped me understand that. Flattery is a junk currency." "This isn't flattery," I said, walking to the broken window and looking down at the dead arteries of road and the slow drift of ash. "It's precedent. You solved the riddle and tried to price it as loot. You'll sell the truth to the highest bidder, and in exchange, you'll start a panic you can't monetize. The sanctuary will riot. The tribes will find their god is a machine. The farmers will notice the noise and sterilize the field." I turned back to him. "Selling the truth is the least profitable thing you can do with it." It was the right argument. He didn't blink, which is how you know a man is thinking. "Your offer?" "Partnership," I said. "Define." "Cartel," I corrected. "We don't sell the truth. We hoard it. We regulate it. We become the invisible hand that guides how fear is priced. We whisper to councils. We whisper to tribes. We make problems on Tuesdays and sell cures on Thursdays through cutouts that swear they've never heard of us. We are not the men with the secret. We are the men who decide what secrets become inevitable." He cleaned his rifle with the indifference of a ritual. "And if I refuse?" "Then you make a one-time score and salt the earth you live on. Choose." He didn't stand. He extended a hand across the ruin between us. His grip was dry, firm, and had the warmth of a ledger. "Terms," he said. We were drawing the bones of the first flow chart: supply, demand, deniability, when the room changed shape without moving. My belt should have been carving a pocket of perfect quiet around me. The little oscillator purred its countertone like a sleeping cat. But the bone song pressed anyway, not ambient now, but focused, a line drawn from somewhere above through me. The dust hung differently in the air, drawn toward a point where shadows had begun to misbehave. "Do you feel that?" Jack asked, head tilted, every animal in him listening. "I feel it." The counter signal faltered, then held. The pressure in my skull sharpened till it was all edge. In the far corner, the dark stopped honoring light. It deepened and drew itself together, wrongness knitting wrongness, until there was a shape a mind tries not to see. 7 feet of polished absence hovering an inch off the floor, drinking brightness until the room dimmed around it. No seams, no joints, no compromise. A weeder from the garden. Jack shot it with the efficiency of habit. The bolt went into black and was simply gone. No flash, no sound, no heat. The thing didn't register the aggression because it didn't have to. It glided toward me, purpose without malice, the way disinfectant finds a stain. Panic is noise. Strategy is subtraction. I pointed at a slate. "Secure channel to Linwood, one-way text, now." Jack didn't ask why. He moved because men like him survive by moving. The weeder came on, air around it crisping into frost. The slate chimed, skeletal interface blooming. I typed fast enough to cut skin. To Dr. Rachel Linwood. Offer. Final activation codes. Location of isolated enzyme. C12. Vital for genome integration. Delivery via cutout. Price. Your complete research database, unredacted. All files pertaining to genomic repair, replication, degradation. Upload to dead drop. X77. Acceptance is your only reply. Send. A lifetime of deals compressed into a single green icon. Uploading, it said in a font that didn't deserve the gravity of its own letters. Core? I asked, eyes still on the weeder. Overloadable, Jack said. It'll take the floor. A diversion, I said. A sacrament, he said, and ripped a panel loose. The weeder raised an absence where an arm would be if it were a thing that believed in arms. The temperature bit my teeth. Go, Jack said, and yanked open a maintenance hatch I wouldn't have found if I'd had a month. The blast was light before it was sound. The world became white, and then the roar hit, the kind that makes the inside of your chest forget what shape it should be. We fell down a throat of cables and old dust while the office we'd been standing in turned into weather above us. Debris chimed off pipes. Somewhere, something screamed that might have been metal and might have been me. We landed in a belly of conduits and old water that hadn't seen water. Jack shoved a slate into my hands while both of us were still learning how to be upright again. The header said what I needed it to say. Linwood Research. Complete. The folders nested like promises. Repair, replication, degradation, seed, and blight in one library. I thought you didn't do sentiment, Jack said. I don't, I said and meant it. I do leverage. We fed the city's underskin for hours until the farmer's hum became a rumor. The bunker we chose was a concrete box under other concrete boxes, a pre-collapse communication sub-level with enough dead machine to keep Jack busy and enough distance from the sky to keep me from clenching my jaw in my sleep. He coaxed life out of server racks like a field surgeon improvising instruments. I laid Rachel's science open in the glow and learned how to name what hurts and how to make it stop. 6 months wrote themselves into the walls. By then, the oscillator at my belt was no longer a failed talisman, but a blade. Jack had distilled the principle of Iva's mud into hardware, a counter-frequency that carved silence out of the air, a personal eclipse. When it hummed, the world trespass couldn't find me. We weaponized quiet. I built an index. I gave it a name because names are handles, and handles let you move big things without letting them crush you. On the main screen, the bone song no longer lived in my bones. It was a waveform with dignity. Alongside it, I graphed derivatives, aggression rates among surface cohort beta 9, veil thickness over sanctuary perimeters, incident counts inside specific domes, mineral fluctuations in closed-loop systems. Over time, the lines learned to speak to each other. A dip here, a spike there. A nudge in trace elements predicts a riot 2 days later. A 3% amplitude increase corresponds to a teachable panic in the western greenhouses. I called the thing that held them together the quiet index, the measure of what we could keep out and what that absence allowed us to see. We tested the loop. Sanctuary 3's hydroponics saw a harmless deficit in micronutrients that no one would notice until the plants did. A week later, a separate, respectable vendor offered a proprietary algae strain that corrected the numbers and improved yield by 8%. The council argued, as councils do, and then paid as panicked people must. Our cutout smiled with a mouth that wasn't ours. We received the payment penned 3 jurisdictions away and never touched it. We are the invisible hand. The point is not to be seen. Sometimes I opened a feed I had no business maintaining, a biodome swing set. A girl who had been dying leaned back into air that said she could stay. Lily's legs pumped. Her hair made a dark banner behind her. Rachel pushed, not smiling, but the tension had gone out of her shoulders as if someone had finally told her the audit was over. I watched without adding commentary. A deal had closed. The client had received value. The file, for my purposes, was resolved. Other feeds mattered more. The orbital telemetry Jack risked too much to scrape kept its watch. 3 masked signatures in patient motion, their resonance a chant too perfect to be nature. Every few days, one of them adjusted its song by a decimal that would be meaningless if you believed in coincidence. We graphed those too. The index, I learned their mood. Jack began to move like quiet was a uniform. He got thinner where fat had been, stronger where instinct had been enough. He spoke less and said more with what he didn't do. The emergency network he'd sown from dead fiber and stubborn hope reached across the city's bones, through the tribe's rough stations, into sanctuaries that had names and those that didn't. Information flowed on channels so old the current regime didn't remember to jam them. When we needed hands, a pair would appear with the right calluses. When we needed a rumor to bloom, it sprouted in a place no one could trace back to us and went to seed down corridors we'd memorized. I kept the index clean and wrote a language both of us could read at a glance. Green when the quiet we paid for held. Yellow when the hum found a new tooth. Red for motion in orbit that made the hair on your arms feel like it remembered lightning. We didn't aim for omniscience. We aimed for being the only sane men in a building that believed the fire alarm was music. Ethics came up once because someone has to file the paperwork even if the ledger is only in your head. How many people did we make suffer to generate demand? Jack asked, not accusing, auditing. Fewer than the number who will die if we guess wrong when the sky decides to take an interest, I said. I didn't dress it in anything it didn't need. He nodded once, as men do when they've checked their own math and found the same answer with smaller words. The Ouija never came to the bunker. We kept our pocket of silence too clean, our footprints too light. But sometimes the index showed a brief flat line that traveled across sectors like a shadow of a shadow, as if an eye had passed over the world and blinked. When those went by, we held still, breathed quietly, and watched the numbers remember themselves. Rachel's research sat in an icon I named because I could. A black file encrypted beyond Jack's patience, locked to a key only I carried. The contents were everything a species would need to remake itself, failures annotated with the passion of a woman who refused to accept the word, and successes labeled with the casual cruelty of science. Inside the file were protocols for patching and protocols for erasing. The same tools build and dismantle if you change what you call the subject. I allowed myself one opinion: ownership in this world isn't land or law. It's naming what is scarce. I owned seed and plague. That made me, by the market scripture, a landlord of futures. The sanctuary learned to look over its shoulder without knowing why. Our cutouts became indispensable, then forgettable, then part of the environment, like oxygen or hunger. The tribes came to believe in a whisperer who told them when to move, where not to sleep, how to string their camps so the hum hurt less. We charged them nothing, which is how you make a debt no one ever finishes paying. Sometimes, when the oscillator at my hip purred, I missed the honest silence Iva had pressed into my skin with ash and moss. Hardware quiet is perfect, sterile, a white cube gallery for thought. The old man's quiet had been earth and thunder and felt like a sacrament. I didn't go back to him. I wrote his name on a page in the index where I keep the things I can't afford to use twice. On a Tuesday, the graph hiccuped in a way it hadn't. The hum didn't just spike or dip, it changed pitch. A fractional restack of harmonics across all sectors, like a musician tightening every string by a hair at once. Jack was at my shoulder before the line finished its turn. "Orbital," he said. The telemetry feed agreed. One of the masked signatures adjusted course by 3 decimals and bled resonance in a way that looked like a test, like a pulse sent out to hear what echoes. "We've been heard," I said. "Or smelled," Jack said. Either way, the index did not yet include a symbol for the farmer deciding to get interested. I opened the black file with my key and didn't take anything from it. I only looked at the table of contents and remembered the feeling of a Ouija turning toward me without eyes and without malice and without choice. "Next phase," Jack said. He never asked what it was called. He knew names are the part of the ritual that matter. "Perennial?" I said. He nodded, as if he'd always known. The plan did not pretend nobility. It did not imagine victory. It did not argue with scale. It started from the premise that markets are the ecosystems of will, and even gods have procurement problems. You can't overthrow a farmer by screaming at the weather. You can make yourself a line item he can't delete without breaking his own budget. We would build what the file promised could be built. An organism that learned itself without error. A seed that ignored fences and sang back. Not to give away, not to share with our own. To offer to the sky on terms we wrote. We would make scarcity so essential the machines above us would approach the only altar they understand: transaction. We worked in the blue glow until the bunker smelled like thinking. Jack pulled maps that were also rumors and wires that were also contracts. I drafted not an epiphany, not a confession, a prospectus. executive summary, value proposition, risk disclosures, terminal, governance, 2 signatures, exit strategy, none. At the top of the document, I put the only title that would tell the truth without getting us killed. Project Perennial, a joint offering by parties, Damon Ford and Jack, DBA, the Quiet Index. I wrote the first paragraph and felt something in the air that might have been hope if hope hadn't been taken apart and sold for parts a century ago. Outside, the bone song threaded the world together like cheap wire. Inside, the oscillator murmured its negation, and the graphs held steady in colors our eyes trusted. On a screen I shouldn't have owned, a girl I would never meet dragged her feet in dust to slow a swing at its apex and laughed. In orbit, something older than our shame exhaled a fraction of a tone and listened. In our box, Jack set a slate beside me without a word. Supply routes, dates we could move without being seen, a cave in a valley where a certain clay bled metal if you knew when to ask it, the kind of details a future has to stand on. I looked at my hands. They were not steady. They were steady enough. The crop thinks the field belongs to the farmer because he sings. The farmer thinks the field belongs to the machines because they weather the sky. The machines think in functions and error rates. They are all right. But the seed, if you own the seed, you own the future tense. I copied the line under the title and watched the cursor blink like a small heart. We did not press send. We let the last page breathe, and for the first time since waking, I felt the world hesitate with us, as if even the song had leaned in to hear the terms.